Last night, someone in your house did something that cost them money. Not by spending it, not by losing it, not by making a bad investment. They cost themselves money by doing something so normal, so automatic, so deeply woven into the routine of modern life, that it never even crossed their mind that it could be a problem. They picked up their phone after the sun went down, opened their banking app, looked at the numbers, and felt that familiar sinking in the chest, that tightness, that quiet panic, that voice that starts calculating. If I pay this, I cannot pay that. If this comes out on Thursday, I am short by Friday. And they lay in bed that night, with those numbers running behind their eyes, and they could not sleep. Sound familiar? Of course it does, because almost every person watching this video right now has done exactly that, this week, maybe even last night. And I need you to hear this clearly. That moment, that specific moment of opening your finances after sunset, with anxiety in your chest and fear in your eyes, is one of the most quietly destructive financial habits that exists. And the Torah, 3,000 years ago, already knew it, already warned against it, already gave us something better. My name is Rabbi Eliyahu, and what I am about to share with you is not a spiritual concept you read once and forget. It is an ancient Jewish financial law, encoded in two separate books of the Torah, practiced by Jewish families for over 3,000 years, that will permanently change the hour at which you count your money. And when you change that hour, everything else begins to change with it. Stay with me until the very end of this video, because in the final section, I am going to give you the complete three-part practice that Jewish families have used for generations instead of counting money after sunset. And I guarantee you, if you apply even one part of what I teach tonight, you will feel the difference by tomorrow morning. Let me take you back 20 years. I was sitting with a family in their home in Brooklyn. The father had called me because he and his wife were fighting constantly about money. Not because they were poor. They had a reasonable income. They had a modest home. Their children were in school and fed and clothed. But every single night, without fail, one of them would open the bills after dinner. And that nightly ritual of counting and calculating in the dark had become a slow poison in their marriage and in their finances. I sat with them at their kitchen table, and I asked the father one simple question. When do you review your finances? He said, at night, after the kids sleep, when it is quiet. I nodded slowly, and I said, and how do you feel when you finish? He looked at his wife, and she answered for him. She said, worse than when we started, every single time, without exception. I told them that evening about a law in the Torah that their grandparents almost certainly knew, that had been practiced in Jewish homes for thousands of years, and that they had somehow lost along the way, not through negligence, not through carelessness, but because modern life had simply buried it under the noise and the screens and the constant accessibility of financial information at any hour of the day or night. And I watched something change in that room as I explained it. Not immediately, but over the following weeks, as they shifted when they counted, and how they counted, and what they said when they finished, the arguments became less frequent. The panic became quieter. Within 3 months, for the first time in years, they told me they felt financially stable, not because their income had increased by a single dollar, but because their relationship with their money had fundamentally changed. And it started with one ancient Torah instruction about one specific time of day. Now, before I tell you what the Torah actually says, I want to spend a moment on something that most people never consider. And that is the question of why money feels so different at night than it does in the morning. Have you ever noticed this? The same bank balance that fills you with dread at 11 at night seems somehow more manageable at 10 the next morning. The same bill that sends your heart racing when you open it after sunset is just a number you deal with calmly after breakfast. This is not your imagination. This is not weakness. This is biology. And the Torah understood it 3,000 years before neuroscience gave it a name. When the sun goes down, your brain shifts. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for rational planning and clear decision-making, begins to hand authority over to the limbic system, the older emotional brain that governs fear and anxiety and threat response. This transition happens to every human being on earth, regardless of wealth or intelligence or spiritual development. It is built into us. And what this means for your finances is devastating if you do not understand it. When you review your money at night, you are doing the most emotionally charged financial task of your entire day. At the precise moment your brain is least equipped to handle it with clarity. The fear you feel when the numbers are not enough is amplified at night. The anxiety that settles into your chest when you see the deficit is heavier at night. The decisions you make when you are staring at an empty account at midnight are consistently the worst financial decisions of your life. Every impulse purchase made in desperation, every panicked withdrawal, every middle-of-the-night decision to move money that you regret by morning. These are the products of nighttime financial anxiety, and the Torah saw this pattern not in a laboratory, but in the lives of millions of people across thousands of years. And it said, "Stop. There is a better way." Let me tell you exactly what the Torah says, because everything I am teaching you tonight is documented, verifiable, real. In Leviticus, chapter 19, verse 13, the Torah states, "You shall not leave the payment of a worker overnight until the morning." And in Deuteronomy, chapter 24, verse 15, the Torah states, "On his day you shall give him his wages, the sun shall not set upon it." The Talmud in Tractate Bava Metzia, the great tractate devoted to financial law, chapter 9, spends considerable time analyzing these two verses. And what the ancient rabbis discovered inside them was not merely a regulation about paying employees on time. It was a complete philosophy about money and darkness and the state of the human heart. The great codifier Rabbi Yosef Karo, who compiled the Shulchan Aruch in the 16th century, the code of Jewish law that has governed Jewish practice for 500 years, formalized what the rabbis had always understood. Financial transactions and financial anxiety and financial reckoning, these belong to the hours of light, not to the hours of darkness. The Hebrew word for money is kesef, and kesef, according to the great Talmudic commentaries, comes from the root niksaf, which means yearning, longing, desire. The rabbis understood that money is not neutral in the human heart. It carries the deepest fears a person has about survival and security and worth. And those fears in the hours of daylight, when the mind is clear and the body is rested, are manageable. But those same fears in the hours after sunset, when the emotional mind is taking over from the rational mind, those fears become something else entirely. They become the voice that convinces you there will never be enough. They become the anxiety that transforms a manageable shortfall into a catastrophe. They become the poison that the Torah said must not be allowed to set with the sun. Now I want to tell you about a teaching from the Zohar, the central text of Kabbalah, that I have returned to dozens of times over the years, because it explains something about money that I have never seen explained better anywhere else. The Zohar teaches that abundance flows into the physical world through channels, spiritual pipelines that connect the infinite realm of divine provision with the material reality of our daily lives. And these channels, according to the Kabbalistic masters, are not blocked by poverty. They are not blocked by bad luck. They are not blocked by the economy or the markets or the decisions of governments. They are blocked by one thing above all others: constriction of the human heart. The state of clenched fear, of tight, anxious holding that money anxiety creates in the chest of a person who has spent years reviewing their finances in a state of dread. A clenched hand cannot receive. A contracted heart cannot hold what abundance tries to pour into it. And the nightly ritual of counting money in darkness, with fear in the eyes and anxiety in the chest, is one of the most consistent and reliable ways to keep those channels closed. The Talmud in Tractate Sota teaches that a person's income for the entire year is determined from above on Rosh Hashanah. Your portion is already decided. And the Kabbalists ask the question that should be obvious to all of us. If the portion is already decided, why do some people receive it fully and others receive only a fraction? And the answer, preserved in the writings of the great Kabbalist Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, in his work Mesilat Yesharim, The Path of the Just, written in the 18th century and studied in yeshivas to this day, is this: the decree provides the potential. The state of your heart determines how much of that potential you can actually hold. Open hands receive. Clenched hands cannot. I want to tell you about a man I will call Nachman. I met him 15 years ago at a community gathering in New Jersey. He was a businessman, reasonably successful, but he came to me after the event and described a pattern that I have heard 100 times. He said, "Rabbi, I work hard, I earn decent money, but somehow, every month, I end up in the same place. The money comes in and the money goes out, and I never seem to get ahead. I never accumulate. I never build." I asked him the same question I asked the couple in Brooklyn. "When do you review your finances?" He said, "Every night before bed. I check everything, every account, every card, every bill, every transaction, every single night without fail." I nodded, and I said, "And when you finish checking, what do you feel?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Like I am drowning in slow motion." I said, "Nachman, you are not managing your money badly. You are reviewing your money badly. And there is a difference. The problem is not the numbers. The problem is the hour and the state of mind you bring to those numbers." And then I taught him what I am about to teach you. Within 60 days, Nachman came back to me and said something I will never forget. He said, "Rabbi, nothing in my finances actually changed. My income is the same. My expenses are the same. But for the first time in 10 years, I feel like I am building something. I feel like I have space to breathe. That is not a coincidence. That is the ancient financial law of the Torah at work in a modern life." Let me now address something that I know some of you are thinking. You are thinking, "Rabbi, I am not wealthy enough to ignore my finances at night. I cannot afford to just not look. The bills are real. The overdraft is real. The anxiety is real." And I want to say this to you directly. I hear you, and I am not asking you to ignore your finances. I am asking you to look at them differently, at a different time, in a different state of mind. Because here is the truth that I have watched play out in hundreds of families over 40 years. The people who review their finances every night in a state of anxiety do not have more financial stability than people who review their finances deliberately in the daylight. They have less. Because every decision made from nighttime financial fear is a worse decision than the same decision made from daytime financial clarity. The Torah is not asking you to be less responsible. It is asking you to be more responsible, in the right hours, with the right eyes. The Talmud in Tractate Pesukim teaches that a blessing does not rest upon something that is counted obsessively, or something that is neglected carelessly. The middle path, the disciplined path, the deliberate path, that is where blessing rests. Not in the anxious midnight counting, not in the willful ignorance, in the intentional daytime accounting followed by the deliberate nighttime release. There is a story in the Talmud in Tractate Tanit that has always struck me as one of the most psychologically precise teachings about money I have ever read. The story is about a man named Nachman ben Gurion, one of the wealthiest men in Jerusalem at the time of the Second Temple. He had borrowed a vast sum of water from a Roman governor, promising to repay it if the rains did not come in time. The day came when the debt was due, and the sky was clear. No clouds, no rain, no way to repay. And the Roman governor was waiting, gleefully, to seize Nachman's entire fortune. Nachman went to the temple and prayed, and as the sun began to set, clouds gathered, and the rains came, in torrents, enough to repay the debt and more. The Roman governor complained, saying the sun had already set, and the debt was therefore forfeit. And Nachman prayed again, and the clouds parted, and the sun came back, just for a moment, just long enough to show that the deadline had been met while there was still light. The rabbis debated this story for generations, and one of the lessons they drew from it, preserved in the commentaries of Rashi and Maimonides, was this: divine provision operates according to the hours of light, not because God cannot act in darkness, but because human beings can only receive what is given to them if their hearts are open, and hearts open in the light. They constrict in the dark. The sun came back for Nachman not merely to satisfy the legal deadline. It came back to restore the state of openness through which abundance could be received. Now, here is what you actually came here for. Not just the law, not just the history, not just the stories, the exact practice. The three-part ancient method that Jewish families have used for 3,000 years instead of counting money after sunset. And I want you to understand something before I give it to you. This practice does not ask you to be naive or careless or irresponsible with your finances. It asks you to be more intentional and more precise and more disciplined about your money than you have ever been. Because the Torah's financial wisdom is not about less attention to money. It is about better attention, at the right time, in the right state of mind. The first part of the practice is what the ancient rabbis called cheshbon, which means accounting or reckoning. Every day, ideally between mid-morning and early afternoon, when your mind is clearest and your emotional defenses are strongest, you take exactly 15 minutes. Set a timer if you need to. You open your finances. You look at what came in. You note what went out. You record what is owed and when it is due. You make any urgent decisions that need to be made. And then, when the 15 minutes are done, with full intention and complete deliberateness, you close it. You say quietly to yourself, I have seen what is here. I have done what I can with today. The rest belongs to tomorrow's light. The Talmud in Tractate Baba Metzia teaches that one's money should always be ready to hand. It means your financial picture should be clear and accessible to you, but clear and accessible in the daylight, not haunting you in the darkness. There is a difference between a farmer who walks his fields once each morning with calm and knowing eyes, and a farmer who runs out to check his crops every hour in the middle of the night in panic. One is wisdom, the other is fear, and only one of them produces a good harvest. The second part of the practice is the sunset release. When the light begins to fade, you make a deliberate, conscious decision. You decide that from this moment, the financial ledger is closed until tomorrow's daylight. This is not avoidance. This is not denial. This is the ancient practice of releasing your grip on the financial wheel for the hours of darkness, and trusting that what has been decreed for you is sufficient to carry you through the night. The Talmud in Tractate Barakot teaches that the nighttime hours are spiritually distinct from the hours of day. What enters your consciousness in those hours goes deeper. It sets more firmly. It shapes more powerfully. This is why the last thoughts before sleep are critical. The Kabbalists taught that the mind during sleep is closer to the divine than the mind during waking hours. Your sleeping consciousness is being shaped and formed, and a mind that goes to sleep in financial anxiety wakes up with financial anxiety already built into its first moments of consciousness, while a mind that goes to sleep having deliberately released the grip of counting wakes up with something different, something more like openness, something more like readiness, something more like enough. The third part of the practice is the morning activation. When you wake, before the phone, before the news, before any screen or any notification, you place your hands open in front of you, palms facing upward, and you say these three things quietly but with full conviction. I am grateful for what was provided yesterday. I receive with open hands what is coming today. I release with trust what is still to come. This morning declaration, practiced every single day without exception, does something I have watched transform the finances of hundreds of families over 4 decades of teaching. It resets your default relationship with money, from chronic low-level fear to intentional reception, from clenched to open, from the psychology of scarcity that the Torah calls poverty consciousness to the psychology of enough that the Talmud calls the foundation of all true wealth. In Pirkei Avot, the Ethics of the Fathers, the sage Ben Zoma asked the question that defines this entire teaching: who is rich? And he answered, one who is satisfied with his portion. This has been misread for centuries as a teaching about settling for less. It is not. It is a teaching about the state of the heart from which all genuine accumulation becomes possible. Satisfaction is not the end of ambition. Satisfaction is the ground from which ambition that is not driven by fear becomes possible. And that kind of ambition, the kind that is not running from something but building towards something, is the kind that actually builds. I want to close with one final story, because I think it is the most important thing I will say in this entire video. There was a great rabbi in 19th century Eastern Europe named Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, the founder of the Musar movement, a school of Jewish thought devoted to the cultivation of moral and psychological depth. He was known for many things, but one of the stories told about him that has stayed with me more than almost any other is this. A student came to him once and said, "Rabbi, I cannot sleep. Every night I lie awake thinking about money, about what I owe, about what might go wrong, about whether I will have enough, And Rabbi Salanter looked at him for a long moment and said, "Your problem is not that you think about money too much. Your problem is that you think about money at the wrong time, with the wrong eyes, in the wrong state of the soul." He said, "Money that you count in fear at midnight is money you have already spent, because the anxiety of that counting costs you more than the debt ever could. It costs you the clarity to see solutions. It costs you the peace to sleep and wake renewed. It costs you the openness to receive what the morning was preparing to give you. Count in the light, release in the dark. Open your hands in the morning. That is the way. That is what the Torah has always been trying to tell us. Not through mysticism, not through magic, but through the simple, profound, ancient wisdom of knowing which hours belong to reckoning and which hours belong to rest. If this teaching has reached something real inside you tonight, then subscribe to this channel right now and turn on notifications. Every single week I bring you ancient Jewish wisdom about wealth, prosperity, and the hidden financial laws that have protected Jewish families through every crisis in 3,000 years of history. Teachings that most rabbis keep within the walls of the study hall. Teachings that you now carry with you. Leave a comment right now and write, "I release the count at sunset." Make that declaration publicly, because the act of saying it out loud is the first step of actually living it. Share this video with one person in your life who checks their bank account at midnight and cannot understand why the anxiety never leaves no matter how much they earn. Because sometimes one video, one teaching, one shift in the hour at which you count can change the entire financial trajectory of a life. And please hit the like button, because this ancient wisdom deserves to reach every person who needs it. I will close with a blessing. May you count in the light and rest in the darkness. May the hands you open each morning receive more than the hands you closed each night feared to lose. May the channels of abundance in your life be open and clear and flowing. May your prosperity find you exactly where the Torah said it would, in the morning, with clarity, with gratitude, with peace. Shalom.